Okay, great. I think we'll get started. So welcome to PEDRI's Data Meets Creativity webinar, an arts-based approach to data engagement. My name is Sarah Shaw. I'm from Smart Data Research UK, which is a UKRI investment, and we are a founding partner of PEDRI. This webinar introduces arts-based approaches as powerful tools to build data literacy, support informed dialogue, and enhance public trust. Its aim is to build attendees' confidence in using arts-based approaches to make complex data concepts accessible and engaging by showcasing real-world examples of creativity in public engagement. So I'm really excited to hear more about that. This is part of a series of webinars aligned to PEDRI's Good Practice Standards and will support attendees to gain knowledge and confidence to do good public involvement and engagement in data research and statistics. Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to introduce our speakers this morning, and then we will hear our presentations and get to our Q&A after that. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Beatrice Gaulau, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the University of Glasgow. She has over 10 years of experience as a statistician working in clinical trials, and Beatrice leads a research programme about improving the ways we involve patients and the public in statistics in trials. Today, Beatrice will be sharing her research using creative methods to improve the communication of statistical aspects between patients and the public and statisticians. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you. And then next we'll hear from Hannah Redler-Laws, who is a UK-based curator and producer of international arts-led projects, specialising in digital, immersive and art and technology, art and science collaborations. Hannah is also the director of Data as Culture art programme, which she will be talking about today. Hannah will highlight examples where artists have produced innovative and powerful artwork to engage people with data and AI. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Beatrice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm just going to share my slides. I'm going to just wait for a nod from one of you that they're showing okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So thank you for inviting me to be here today. My name is Beatrice. I'm going to be talking about communicating complex statistical concepts to patients and the public. I'm a statistician by background with a strong interest in elicitation and communication of health statistics. The concept we created, these creative workshops, we called Stats That Speak, and we've run them, tested them, evaluated them, and what we have found is that they generate an improved understanding of statistics by people that take part. And these people, in our context, are statisticians, members of the public, and creative professionals from different backgrounds. And we've seen an improvement of understanding in statistics, an improvement of confidence in communication of statistics. And it's important to highlight that this is about everyone taking part improving. It's not about statisticians being there to teach members of the public or creative professionals about statistics. It's about a two-way street of communication and shared understanding of statistical concepts so we can have better patient and public involvement. Really interestingly, we've also seen an improvement in relationships when people get together in a creative context. There is this perception that hierarchies are less important when we're talking in creative terms, because the statistician might be the most knowledgeable about the creative concept, the statistical concept, but they won't know how to put it in creative terms. So everyone there is learning something new. And then finally, we've assessed that this is a highly acceptable intervention that leads to these positive outcomes in the 2 pilot studies we've done. So to give you a bit of context of how we reached creative workshops as a solution, we were thinking about how do we quantify a patient-important difference. So in the context of clinical trials, we are looking for differences between treatments. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction into this. patients are, in the context of clinical trials, randomized to either a treatment or a control. So in this fictional example, a virtual checkup or a regular checkup in a dental setting. And we then measure their outcome, so in this case, bleeding gums. In order for us to say that we should be recommending virtual checkups over regular checkups, we need to compare the two treatments, the two interventions, in terms of their bleeding gums. So we're looking for a difference between them, but we're not looking for any difference. We're looking for a difference that is meaningful, that makes a difference in clinical practice, that makes a difference to patients. However, patients have rarely been involved in determining what is a meaningful difference between treatments. So that's where this project called Pinpoint, that I lead, that is funded by the MRC, came about. It's about improving patient and public involvement in what we call, in more jargon term, target differences in clinical trials. But target differences really should be about important differences, what matters to patients, to healthcare professionals, to other relevant parties. So in this case, we're trying to detect something that is better. Are virtual checkups better than regular checkups? Sometimes we're trying to detect whether something is just good enough. So whether virtual checkups might be slightly worse than regular checkups, but offer some advantages. So we're getting into quite complex designs within clinical trials. Those clinical trials are called non-inferiority trials, and they detect this difference. They decide whether to recommend a treatment over another based on something called non-inferiority margins. Now, please bear with me, because my point is they are so technically, their language is so technical, the way we communicate about them is so jargony, that we had to find a solution on how do we speak to patients about what are these margins, why do they matter, why should patients care about, so we can start building a community of patient and public involvement in something that sounds very technical, but actually can make a massive difference in what gets recommended by the NHS in the UK. So I wanted to show you, just as an example, what does this definition look like? And it looks, no one would engage with this. Maximum loss in efficacy of the standard treatment effect, considered acceptable. Even when I look at it, I need to stop myself and go word by word to try to understand it. Our goal was to translate this into something that people could actually understand and talk about, a shared understanding, as I said at the start. And so we wanted to go from this jargon term of non-inferiority margins to something like good enough margins. And what we're trying to say is the new treatment good enough compared to the old treatment, considering it offers other advantages beyond clinical benefits. So that could be less time consuming, lower risk of adverse events. And there's a really cool video on YouTube by the New England Journal of Medicine Evidence channel that uses an analogy of two taco restaurants and how basically we make these decisions on a daily basis. So if our favorite taco restaurant is further away and perhaps doesn't offer takeaway, we might be able to consider, or we might want to consider, an option that is slightly worse according to customer ratings, but that provides other advantages. It's a day-to-day decision making, but we're not used to thinking about it in the context of clinical trials, or especially when we're using really sophisticated jargon like non-inferiority margins. That's how the creative workshops came about. We wanted to be able to communicate these concepts, but also to improve shared understanding. And to do that, we decided to co-develop creative prototypes that could be used to communicate about important differences to a wider audience. So non-inferiority margins is an example of that, of a potentially important difference. We've done this with other statistical concepts, but I'm going to focus on this example of important differences. We have published this. There's more information out there if you want to find out more detail. But how does it work in practice? So first, as I've shown you, we've identified the topic. Non-inferiority margins, important differences, target differences, all of those had been selected as a priority. So patients and the public, statisticians, clinicians came together and said, this is really important. We should have better involvement in these concepts. That's how we identify the topic. We then were working with public partners to build the research project. And after we had this concept, this priority, and the idea of creativity, we went to creative professionals, and they helped us build the workshop format that we have here. So please don't think that I went by myself and just created the concept. I had lots of help from really important disciplines in order to build this up. We prepared documentation in advance. We wanted people to feel prepared when they came into this workshop. Because it could feel quite daunting to just say, we're going to talk about this concept of important differences, and we're not telling you anything about it before you come here. We wanted to make sure that people felt prepared and confident enough to start the discussions. We then hosted the workshop. We did it online and in person. So we had both experiences. And finally, we evaluated it through surveys and open questions that were discussed within the group on the day. So when we walked into the workshop, this was about how can we better involve patients in this concept that in jargon is called target differences. Let's generate ideas to improve its communication, its understanding, its inclusiveness. And there were certain rules that we asked people to follow. So the rules were about this idea that people were discussing must be replicable and scalable, easy to understand in a short period of time, can be used by itself, and could be used with limited resources. So, for example, we weren't talking about a big science festival with £1 million to use that we might not necessarily be able to replicate or find the resources to do. And so I hosted the workshop with a writer and comedian called Susan Morrison. She has a lot of experience of communicating science. The workshop was basically an introduction where we, got to know each other, talked about the aims of the workshop. We then got into an idea generation in a box, and in a box that basically means that there were some limitations to the ideas, as I said earlier. We then took a break, and when people came back, we asked them to bring these ideas to life. So what could we use as outputs to communicate these ideas to a wider audience? These two, idea generation and ideas coming to life, aspects of the workshop were done in smaller teams, and the smaller teams had to have a statistician, a member of the public, and a creative professional. Within the smaller teams, we also asked them by the end to do some reflective learning. What had they learned from the experience of the workshop together? And then finally, we asked each smaller team to present to the full group about their creative outputs and discuss their experience of taking part in the workshop. We're currently developing some cards that can help people take this forward and use it in their own context and with their own statistical concepts that they might want to improve communication of. And so they will look like cards to help introductions and creative icebreakers. And we use really simple icebreakers like if you were an animal, what would you be and why? But also cards about self-reflection, prompts about what did we accomplish today? What is important about what we did? Where could we use the stats that speak method again? And how well did it go? What should we be doing differently in the future so we can improve future iterations of the workshops? On the day when we were focusing on important differences, we had some really cool ideas about how to communicate them to a wider audience. So about layered approaches of communication, where you get more in-depth and potentially more technical as you go forward. And so only people that are interested in that level of detail might be able to see it. The idea of using games where you can allocate different points or coins to choose your preferences based on the differences, the important differences between treatments. There were also cartoons and humor, and this story about an alien that had a burping issue and needed medication to treat it. And an interactive game called the Book of Nim, where people would learn about non-inferiority margins in an engaging and fun way. And so as we reached reflections, people had a lot to share in terms of how to improve it, but also about how much they enjoyed taking part, and how much fun they had with statistics, which was our ultimate goal. In fact, this workshop is much more about the experience and what people are learning and the relationships they're building during that process, than it is about the outputs that we then come up with. In terms of outputs and things that people can use immediately, we have prepared work. So work led by Sophie Greenwood in terms of using puzzles to communicate about missing data. So that's another aspect that is interesting and cuts across multiple data research projects, and videos to explain these important or meaningful differences that build on what we had done in the workshops. So we have a website that you can visit to find out more and to see these videos, get the resources that I've just showed you. But also, please feel free to speak to me. Obviously, very happy to answer any questions at the end, but also you can reach me in this email. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Beatrice. That's absolutely great. I really love the use of the cartoons in your slides as well. Really nice. If someone in the team could please drop the links and things into the chat. I know you put an article in there at some point, Anna. Thank you for that. Or Katie may have done it. You mentioned a publication, Beatrice. Maybe we could post a link to that, and then your LinkedIn and your email as well, so people can get hold of you if they weren't quick enough with the QR code there. That'd be great. Thank you so much. Great to hear from you. And now we'll go over to Hannah. Thank you very much, Hannah.
My name's Hannah Redler-Hawes. I work at the Open Data Institute, where Data as Culture is the art programme of the organisation. I'm going to drop various links in the chat after my talk, but Open Data Institute was invented or inaugurated by Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Professor Sir Nigel Shadbolt in 2012, and it brings businesses, governments and civil society together to generate economic benefits and tackle real-world challenges using data, advancing trust in data and making a world where data works for everybody. And I imagine a lot of people connected to PEDRI have an awareness of the ODI, but I will share links. But when ODI was founded to sort of address all the issues around working with data, making data work for everybody along the spectrum between open and closed, shared and not shared data, they realized within, even as the organization was being inaugurated, that if they were going to be working on a project that's essentially underwriting the next stage of the World Wide Web and network culture, which data systems and data infrastructures are doing, have done. Culture was a really, really important part of that. So the artist Julie Freeman proposed that they have an art program and spend a portion of budget every year on commissioning artists, and that has indeed happened. So I've been with the ODI since 2014 when it was 2. I think that, I think they're now like 12 or 14 years old. And the Data as Culture programme is a small activity, but quite important in terms of thought leadership. So we bring artists in to explore research themes, to collaborate with our researchers, to collaborate with researchers in organisations that we work with, and to do residencies, and we do exhibitions. So some of the snaps on this slide, Rules of Engagement was an online exhibition that is still online. I'll drop this link in the chat later on. And that was an exhibition we invited the artist Antonia Roberts to curate during COVID to commission a series of artworks that encouraged people who work with data to think about the power that holds and to think about ongoing data ethics. And where that brief came from was from our sort of quite famous data ethics canvas, which is something many of the people who work with ODI use. But a lot of organizations and individuals will use the data ethics canvas at the beginning of a project because they really care about ethics and they want to make it happen. But it doesn't people don't always keep coming back to it. And actually, as I'm sure most people here are aware, data ethics is an ongoing process. So we commissioned 3 artworks to just make people consider how we engage with data is an ongoing thing, and there are issues that sort of embed and weave and implications that affect people throughout. The new observatory was a really massive exhibition we curated with FACT in Liverpool, which is the big art gallery in Liverpool. And I co-curated that with Sam Skinner at FACT, who was there at the time. And we were really interested in thinking about alongside conversations around surveillance, we wanted to really untangle the notion of observation and the kind of good, social good, civic good, personal good that can happen from observing and capturing data through multimodal ways in all different types of materials. So we had artists who were working with data as drawing, filmmaking, citizen sensing, anything you can imagine, and just kind of thinking about what happens when we bring imagination, analysis, and understanding into the role of observation. Lamau, short for Laughing My Off, was an exhibition we did at the ODI headquarters where we sort of brought humor and absurdity into data conversations. And I'll share, I think, one work from that shortly. I'll just say about Copy that was an exhibition, and all of this is online, where we were thinking about the myth of the perfect digital copy and what happens when we replicate ourselves through our data shadows, for example. And I'll share a piece from that. And finally, I'll mention the Frame project, which was a wonderful Braid-funded project we did as a commission from the University of Sheffield for their Framing Responsible AI Implementation and Management project, which completed last year, and we brought in artist Blast Theory to collaborate with the research team as co-researchers and create a work, which I'll also talk about in a moment. So my title slide didn't come up, but it was called What's Rugs Got to Do with It? Got to do with it. And we often put things up at the ODI and with our exhibition partners that slightly puzzle people and slightly surprise people and make people ask, what's data? Where's the data? What's this got to do with anything? So in 2018, we had the exhibition Lamau, and this was a piece that wasn't commissioned. It was a piece that we selected to go in the exhibition by Rita Urtinen. It's called Mini Rugs and Their Friends. And Rita likes to make little mini rugs, which you can see in the slide, and while she's watching TV. And in 2014, she had the idea that she would submit her mini rugs to the Google image search analysis to see how it analyzed the rugs. And what came back was surprising and perhaps not surprising, in that in 2014, nothing came back as a textile or a rug. Lots came back as very gendered, very stereotyped imagery. So pinks and reds came back as female things or female people. Blues came back as male biased gendered objects. Yellows and whites came back as naked female white flesh. Browns and blacks did not come back as naked flesh, female or otherwise. So there was an awful lot of bias in the system, and there's lots and lots of questions around what do we really mean by an intelligence in this context. So for the exhibition, we resubmitted the rugs to Google image search, and nothing had changed. So I'll leave that for us to consider the implications of that and what's seen and what's not seen. I've lost my dates. Yes, in 2018, 2019, the late, great artist Alistair Gentry joined us to be an artist in residence in our research project, UK government-funded research project looking into data trust and sharing. And through that residency, he started thinking about what we share about ourselves, where that goes, what the implications are, and what we know about it. And I'll give you a very brief clip of him talking about Docsbox Trustbot, the work that he made. Sarah, I hope you can flag with me if the video doesn't play.
Docsbox is a pretend AI. It interviews you about your digital life and the services you use, and then it can tell you stories about the effects that might have on your life as a whole. There's a lot of real technology that's pretending to be technology, but is really just people behind the scenes. With this project, I wanted to sort of make that plain. All of these systems, all of these apps have humans behind them, and they have human values embedded in them. The prejudices that we all have about each other, they're all really deeply embedded in technology, and technology is not neutral. People interact with it as if it's a thing, as if it's an entity or a machine. even though there's a person sitting next to it working it.
It was just really telling me about how data is used online, I mean, just telling me what I already knew but didn't want to know.
I use all of them, most of the things, Microsoft, Facebook, WhatsApp. If I use Amazon, they can have access to my ID, like my chat history, everything. I better take a snapshot of all of that.
DocsBox is pink, glittery, gold, queer, slightly broken, as an attempt to present an alternative vision of how technology could be. The fact
So that was DocsBox. DocsBox was a project that ran between 2018-19 and 2023, with Alistair performing it in many, many guises at live events in the park, like you saw in the video, hopefully, and often online. We also, Alistair and I joined researchers looking into cybersecurity at King's College London, and they wrote a new script for it. And what would happen is you'd have a one-to-one conversation with the DocsBox, which you can see in this image. And the DocsBox looks like a robot. It acts like an AI. You think it's an AI, but it's not an AI, because every single word it says, every single video it plays is controlled by the artist dressed in his big pink gimp suit in real time. And what was really interesting evaluating it with people afterwards is how many people, when we said it was a hot pink puppet robot, people thought that Alistair, the human, was the robot, not the fake AI. So which again raises some really great questions, and it brought a lot of laughs. I mentioned rules of engagement earlier on. So one of the pieces is called fairyintelligent.tech, and I'll just let you watch a little preview of it. The real thing is online. You can play it, and it has a voiceover in real life, but have a look now. So that's Fairly Intelligent teaser. Fairly Intelligent was created by the artist A.M. Dark, who is an American artist and professor, games designer as well. And they wanted to really look into the assumptions that are baked into these all-collecting, all-seeing systems that we're investing so much of ourselves in. And one of their questions is, the machines are learning, but who are their teachers? And they wanted to explore notions of neutrality. So this is an experience for when you play Fairly Intelligent, it's like you're being audited by a system to see if you would make a good auditor, and it's kind of checking your values. But the values it gives you through different multiple choices are values that are quite hard to align with sometimes, and it does that deliberately from the perspective of a fictional character that's very similar but not identical to the artist, which is a Black feminist genderqueer scholar. And when people are like, oh, is that a bit, like specific? They're like, well, actually, a lot of the technology we're using is biased to a very particular type of person, type of demographic. And again, that's something that, in making a world where data works for everyone, we want to think about is just inputting lots more diverse data the answer to the inbuilt bias in these systems. AM challenges that and wants people to just think about it. Then I'm just jumping around between our history because of the 10-minute slot. But in 2023, obviously that was a massive year for AI. AI really came along leaps and bounds. It surprised a lot of people who work with AI, who are really expert. And Gen AI really, really kind of like came on in leaps and bounds. And at our summit in 2023, we wanted to address some of the questions, the ODI summit around AI. And we invited the artist Alan Warburton to make a piece that brought an artist perspective. And The Wizard of AI, which is the piece he made, is a piece that looks at the condition he identifies as an animator, as an artist, as an academic scholar in this field, of the sort of wonder panic condition. Here's a trailer. So here's some stills from the film, which is online. It's about 20 minutes. And the amazing thing about this animated film is it's, like 99.9% AI generated. And Alan created it over 3 weeks in October 2023, often using tools that were literally released within hours in advance of him using them. And it raises a lot of questions around hidden labor, around rights, around copyright, around potential, around shifting working patterns, around, exciting potential as well as perhaps more troubling conversations. It's very philosophical, and it sort of treads a path that, again, like some of the other works I've shared, ask us to just think about the social and cultural implications, the implications for ourselves personally of the evolving networks and technologies and data systems that we're part of, and also that we're the creators of. So often when I bring artists to work at ODI, they want to hear the ODI perspective on what data is. And one of my favorite responses was, well, data's about stuff we care about. We collect data that matters to us. We benefit from sharing really significant bodies of data, particularly in medical research, for example, particularly in apps like Citymapper. But also there are things that we need to consider about how our lives are changing within these systems as well, and the exciting things and the things that we might want to pause about. And I think this is nearly my final slide, which is the photographs from the FRAME project with the University of Sheffield. So Blast Theory came in and took part in a process where the FRAME researchers were looking into the notion of responsible AI and what it means in different industries. So we're working with the multinational Everton, with the British Library, big institution, big heritage organisation, guardian of a lot of really significant data, University of Sheffield, Sheffield City Council, who use data to provide really important services, life-changing, essential services to service users, and the Open Data Institute. And what the researchers found is that the notion of what responsible is and a responsible AI policy is very slippery. There's no standardized terms. And practice, again, this which reflects the conversation I mentioned around the data ethics canvas, practice is the thing. So the artist Blast Theory responded to this notion of slippery definitions and came up with the idea of soap as a metaphor, not for ethics washing, but actually for the practice of responsible AI as a daily thing, as a thing we do for others. We wash to make ourselves appealing to others. We wash for hygiene, and thinking like, what is good responsible data ethics hygiene? And they commissioned a photographer, Melanie Pollard, who took these portraits of, I'm one of them, various of us researchers on the project, holding soaps that are embossed with words that we think are important. So you have transparency, shared understanding, inclusion, and iteration, practice, and the like. So that's me done. In the links, I'm going to also share a new film from Alan Warburton called Image Empire, which looks at, really developing computational systems and how that's affecting truth, reality, and all sorts. But I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. That was really interesting. I'm sure many of us will go and watch the videos in full. So appreciate all their links going into the chat as well. So over to the audience. I'm sure everybody's enjoyed hearing from the speakers so far. We do have some questions already in the Q&A, but don't forget you can type anything in there that you want to ask. And you can also upvote other people's questions if you particularly want to hear an answer as well. We will obviously try and get through as many of those as possible. And anything we don't get to that's particularly of interest, we can probably handle after the call. So if speakers are ready, here we go. So the first question we've got is for Beatrice. Can you answer who facilitated the process of finding and working with the creative professionals, the admin, payment, contracting, etc., and who facilitated the workshops, please?
I get this question a lot about finding creative professionals that want to work with us. So it was the creative professional senior person, I suppose, that she helped me come up with the idea, the design of the workshops, and she co-facilitated the workshops with me. Her name is Susan Morrison. And she was the one that identified other creative professionals that wanted to work with us. From an admin perspective, that was run by the university. And I think that addresses the whole, who facilitated. So that was me and Susan. It was really thinking about the idea of we want to bring together statistics and creativity. So I was talking about the more boring bits, let's say, about, what are the stats ideas we're trying to communicate and why do they matter, whereas Susan was making sure that that was fun, engaging, and translated in real time. She's brilliant. So that's how it worked.
If you know her website or anything, if you want to pop that in the chat as well for people to have a further look,
that's a great idea. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so we've got another question here that's been upvoted by 4 people. Put this to Hannah. Do you have any advice for how to encourage data scientists to engage with art and PPIE, especially if it is a new area and maybe out of their comfort zone?
I could talk for hours on this. So I've been working
2 minutes.
in disciplinary context for 30 years. I've worked at the Science Museum for a long time. I'm working with a lot of technical organizations now, a lot of universities. So I'm part-time at the ODI. But I don't know what PPI is.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's public patient engagement. So basically how we're engaging with members of the public.
So there's not one answer. But the first thing, and what the most successful interdisciplinary collaborations I've encountered are the ones where the scientist or the researcher and the artist forms a bond and they find some shared understanding and some shared goals. And that often comes through their research. So they might be researching the same kind of thing, but from a really different perspective. And I have never met a scientist or researcher introduced to an artist who was passionate about their subject who didn't find some common ground. But there is when people find I'm a curator, a lot of people say, oh, well, I can't draw, in an almost apologetic way. And I think that we have a culture where people sort of feel like artists somehow maybe see themselves above the rest of us, and that's really not the case. All the artists I work with, and many artists, if in the contemporary art world at the moment, science and technology are really, really rich seams. People are very, very interested. But artists are really keen to have that opportunity to stretch their own practice and to dive deeper. But it's all about relationships. It's all about people finding the time to talk. It sounds like Beatrice and Sarah, I think it was, you spent time talking, you spent time thinking about the comfort, you spent time thinking about the construction of the interdisciplinary platform that you were creating. So there's legwork, it takes longer, it costs more, there are more mouths to feed in it, but I think it's worth it because that's why I do it.
Yeah. Thank you. Great. Okay, so kind of almost a follow-on, obviously, from somebody who's interested in thinking about doing this themselves. Do you have any recommendations for funding sources to develop art exhibitions connecting science and public with data science? I don't know if Beatrice, if you've got any thoughts on that one.
Well, so we were funded through public engagement awards within the university, and there's actually quite a few of them nationally. Even though, as you could tell, our activity was about involvement and engagement, there is, an element of engaging with statistics in that activity, but it was to form better involvement. So you can almost tap into both areas of funding, although my knowledge is more of public engagement funding in that area. However, there has been funding from a panel called Better Methods, Better Research from the NIHR that has funded research on better patient and public involvement, and that would have included creative methods as an approach. So that's my academic side, and I'm sure Hannah can add more on the artist side.
Thank you. Hannah, anything to add?
Sure. The art funding world is really depleted at the moment. I go to a lot of academic sources for a lot of the projects. So BRAID, Bridging Responsible AI Divides, EPSRC, AHRC, look for the interdisciplinary things, but make sure when you're looking into those things that you have arts experts advising on the way that you formulate your concept and the way that you build your project and plan it. Art-specific funding, Arts Council, the Space, which is a digital arts funding scheme, is pretty wide-minded. Yeah, where else have I had money from? Those are the recent ones.
That's great.
Yeah.
Really helpful. Thank you. And a couple of people are asking about target audience for exhibitions and how members of the public would find out about them. So I suppose the implied question there is, if you don't know who the ODI are, and you wouldn't necessarily be jumping on the ODI website very often, which, you know, some people, you know, might, but not everybody will, then, you know, how would, you know, normal man or woman in the street come across your work?
Yeah, so we actually haven't done an exhibition on site for several years, not since COVID, unfortunately, because that changed our model. We used to do loads and loads of training in the office, thousands of people a year. So that's one of the reasons we had shows in the office. So now we're doing stuff online, and I do stuff in partnership with other organizations. But in terms of, did the questioner want to know how you identify a target audience?
No, but that's probably of interest as well. It was more about, you know, who is the target and how would members of the public
ODI. Yeah, so the ODI data as culture target audience there's a range, and it depends which organization we're collaborating with. So on site, it's the people who work with data who we collaborate with day to day. It's also really important in terms of staff morale, and being a young organization in a fast moving industry, a really sort of fast paced, you know, situation, is bringing in that critical discourse. You know, there's a lot of plodding detail one has to do, working on data policy, they're working on Tim Berners-Lee's solid protocol. That might not be the right word, solid anyway, at the moment. But, you know, how do you keep thinking in the round? And then when we work with a partner like FACT Liverpool, they have a really broad remit to reach marginalised communities, to reach the local community of Liverpool. And that would be the same when we've collaborated with the V&A Museum. So we're looking at the target audiences of those organisations. Another project we did that I didn't share today, we were asked by the University of Southampton to think about marginalised people who aren't being asked about data. So we collaborated with Birmingham Open Media, an arts organisation in Birmingham, to do a project specifically for and with neurodivergent adults in the West Midlands. And that project is about 10 years old now. Mood Pinball came out of it. But we've discovered through that project that many neurodivergent people, I'm a very neurospicy family, so I knew this, have hyperacusis, struggle with sound in public places. There was no public open data about sound levels in cities. So we actually synthesized data to embed in the playfield of the work that we created. But it opened up a conversation around who's the city for, what makes a comfortable city, for example.
Interesting. It's amazing how these things spin out from your original concept. Fascinating. Thank you. Beatrice, coming back to you, if you could do the whole process over again, what, if anything, would you do differently?
We want to do the process all over again.
Lots of time.
I think it works really well, but of course there are things we want to improve on it. So I guess one of the things, picking up actually from Hannah's theme of engaging with people that potentially are less interested in data or from minority groups, I think we can take that a step further. So we started by assessing people's numeracy as they walk in and trying to make sure that we have a range of numeracy levels within the group from a public membership perspective, but creative professionals are also there without being experts in statistics. And so that's something that we want to improve on. We want to recruit wider audiences, varied audiences, and replicate this, see how it works and how it adapts. But that's definitely what we found was the key aspect of success, was that we are talking about statistics, but in a new language, in a language that needs to be accessible to everyone here. And so that's why I think it has lots of potential to be helpful in those settings. There are other suggestions that are in the paper and that people came up with, the public partners, the creative professionals, because they wanted more props, they wanted more fun. So they wanted to use Lego to create new ideas, to unlock creativity, basically. And so there's loads of different things we can do. We have definitely found that the in-person format worked better, for example. So that's another thing where we've done it online, we've done it in person, and in person it really seemed to create these relationships in a much more fluid way. And so those, I think, are the aspects.
That's great. And you kind of, we've got a, sorry, Hannah, just go on.
It's just, I think it's really important. I didn't say, because I didn't finish my thought, is the work we do in Data as Culture is absolutely aimed at people who don't work with data as well. It's accessible to people who don't work with data. So like bringing DocsBox into the park. And most of the people who participated in that DocsBox experience wouldn't have gone to a seminar about data trust and sharing, but they were embodying it in the conversation. Yeah, so data literacy is super important to people who think data is a difficult word.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really good point about going to where people are, not expecting them to come to you. It's really important. We've kind of almost covered one of the questions that we've got here that was about translating today's presentations into face-to-face patient and public involvement, especially with underrepresented communities, which you've both mentioned. I think it sounds as if Beatrice, your more in-depth stuff that you've got online will help answer that question as well. But if there's anything you wanted to add about translating what we've seen today from data and creativity into face-to-face, is there anything you want to add on that, either of you?
As I said, I did think it worked better in person, and that was like the room experience. So it wasn't just my impression; it was what they told us. But we were focusing on different numeracy levels, and we would like now take it to different minority groups, potentially neurodivergent participants. So that's the next step. In a way, what we were doing was a proof of concept, piloting this to see how it worked. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously, from what you've been saying, the way that you approach your work in person is preferable. And obviously, we've heard from Hannah that, particularly with COVID, we've moved from having people come to the office to the more online exhibitions, which potentially have got the opportunity to reach a broader audience. We have got a question about how successful online exhibitions are compared to in person for you, Hannah, and what does it entail exactly? So what would that experience be like for somebody?
So well, that's again, it really what your expectation is for it will affect how successful it is. So in terms of the rules of engagement exhibition, for us, it's super successful because the ODI training team use the 3 online works in their training all the time. When I go and lecture to computer science students, data students, art students, I share the online artworks and we discuss them and we explore them, and just it generates so many conversations, and that's what that is there for. There's a gallery called Arbeit, it's a digital art gallery. When they went online, because they had to in COVID, they were astonished by the global response, because they are digital art specific. People who love digital art go to them expecting it and they find it. If you just set up an online project without any audience development or any audience engagement strategy, it's not going to work, same as the real world. But I would say we don't just do stuff online with ODI, it's just now we work with physical partners. So the most recent film we did was in collaboration with the National Video Games Museum, and they were the lead partner. That's the Alan Warburton. But yeah, it's
fantastic. And just follow on there, somebody asking about evaluation as part of that practice. How do you go about evaluating the outcomes from the exhibitions and the commissioned artwork? And what kind of key outcomes are you focused on? I'm guessing that depends on which exhibition we're talking about, but maybe if you just give one example of that would be great.
Well, it's project by project, and it also depends on your funding and your funder requirements. So I come from a museums background where there would be like very, very highly researched visitor research informing in-depth evaluations, formative, in progress and summative evaluations. I've never had the budget for that in the work I do as Data as Culture, but we do set goals at the start, and then we try to capture how successful they've been. And they might be goals to do with who's understood what, how many outputs, how many types of engagement. We might collect feedback through feedback questionnaires. It's such a knotty thing. I don't think I can give a simple answer.
No.
But I will say that if you want to evaluate, build it into your budget. Nobody builds it enough into their budget. Build a lot into your budget, and think about speaking to an evaluation or audience expert at the get-go, and they will help you set your goals, and they will know how to do a cheaper version or a full-on all singing, all dancing version. I know people if you need people.
Thank you. There's another question along the same line, really, about measuring engagement. So any advice I think that you can share on that afterwards would be good. And there's a couple of requests for things to drop into the chat when you get a second. Somebody asking for the AI movie about the washing machine, or the hand washing the soaps. I think there's a link you were going to put in there. It says washing machine. I'm presuming they mean the soap.
That is not an AI movie. The AI movie is Alan Warburton, Wizard of AI, and that should be in the link. Instant Washing Machine is a series of photographs and a series of workshops and performances of hand washing. And again, that's on the website. Thank
you. And somebody asking about how to approach the ODI to talk about new creative projects. So whether that's you want people to get in touch with you, or whether there's a mechanism on the website for that as well, maybe you could answer that. Call Hannah. There you heard it from her.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Don't put your phone number in the chat, please.
Yeah, I'm not putting my phone number in the chat. I'm just being last century because I am a last century person.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Okay. Let me just see what else we've got here. So any further advice, and we are coming up on time, but any further advice for engaging people who might be outside of the data interest circles? So we've sort of talked about this a little bit, people who don't typically think about data in their everyday life, even though we're all surrounded by it and creating it all the time. People who haven't necessarily interacted with data research or who are new to it, any advice for that? And I think we've heard from both speakers that it's about, that good communication, but any kind of, in a nutshell, points to add on there would be great. Thank you.
So for us, as for Hannah, we weren't looking for people that had engaged with data research before. So that's exactly what this was about. It was people that were new and naive to it. So we could make sure that then they would buy into further involvement. And what we did was we worked with members of the public that had limited experience of data research or interest in it to recruit, so to prepare recruitment materials that would then go out to other members of the public that might be interested. So that's how we've done it. It was through refinement of recruitment and then having quota in recruitment in our case, because we had a limited number of participants that could take part in each workshop. So we had some quota for lower literacy in data or higher, and so we managed to have people from different backgrounds, and we were looking at the number of characteristics in that. So that's how we've done it. It was adapting recruitment materials, making sure that we recruited from local communities to have a diverse audience.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Hannah, anything further to add?
Do you mind repeating the question? I was writing my email when you said it.
No, that's fine. Sorry, asking you to multitask and talk all at the same time. So it's basically just about how to engage with people who typically wouldn't think about data research. And Beatrice was talking about making sure that your recruitment for participation in workshops, or in your case, your audience engagement analysis and work, how you go about that. And I think the theme there is, to be super thoughtful about who you want to reach and think about where they are and how you can engage with where they already are to bring them into your world.
Always, yeah. It's bringing people with you. So with the Mood Pinball, we worked with neurodiverse people first, and then we found that neurodivergent audiences really enjoyed the work, not surprisingly. Well, it was a nice surprise. But I think everything that Beatrice said, you agree who you want to speak to at the get-go. That helps you set your goals and you tailor it, and you make sure that you speak in a language that your audience can hear and not talking down, talking with. I think that's probably a theme we haven't necessarily said out loud, but it's talking with, it's a dialogue. It's not about telling people what to think. It's about exploring issues that matter to people with them.
Definitely. Yeah, well said. Quick question, Beatrice, again, you might be able to put this in the chat. Somebody asking who did your participation recruitment for you. You might have a recommendation there that you could share. That would be great. And then we're going to take one last question from our Q&A. Which I'll ask you both to just comment on. We have got about 2 minutes left, so just a relatively short answer will be appreciated. Thank you. And the question is, how would you initiate a transdisciplinary collaboration with artists, academics, public members and data? Would you find a funder first, or would you look together for one? Or would you use existing relationships to see what is there already? Now, that's quite a big question. So I suppose it's about how you approach your projects. So perhaps if you've got something to share that would be helpful for somebody doing this for the first time, that would be the most useful way to answer it. Thank you.
I think it really depends on what the project is and what the aims are. But traditionally, if you're going for this interdisciplinary idea, which I think both Hannah and I are talking about people learning from each other, then you would want to be speaking with creative professionals, and in my case anyway, with members of the public from the get-go. That's how you form the idea. And I think then you think about the funder, where does this fit best, rather than the other way around. But I don't know if Hannah would have the same process.
I pretty much agree. I mean, you start with your idea, someone will have the idea first, and then you start building your team. And then, yes, you then look for the funder, but no funder will be a perfect fit. So what I find is you're writing the same application, but adapting it to different funders, and some you win and many, many more you lose. And it's about, just keeping plodding on. If you want something to be interdisciplinary, but you don't have an interdisciplinary team, you do your research. So if you're a scientist who's interested in finding an artist who's interested in pattern forming, if you can't find them yourself, speak to an arts professional. There are millions of freelance curators dying to speak to you.
Just dying to hear from you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. A lovely note to end on.